the basal or the base of the spur. Hello, this is Bill Sisler in my vineyard in Paso Robles. We're looking at a Cabernet Sauvignon vine that's mature. It's a little over 10 years old, and I have pruned them every year to a state that I like, that makes it easier to do pruning every year. And my goal is to, every time I prune, is to choose a cane from last year that's the closest to the cordon. That way I remove any long-legged spurs from last year, and it keeps it pretty clean. This vine is fairly vigorous, and so the best thing to do to start is to pre-prune. Pre-pruning can be done anytime early in the spring, and it can be done by someone with not too much skill. You just have to instruct them. But if you're particular about how you prune, then I prefer to do the final pruning. So first we'll do the pre-pruning, which is we'll cut off the canes about 8 to 10 inches above the spur and clean the area out so we can get a closer look at what we have to do. One thing that you might consider, because these get attached to the wires, and sometimes when you pull them off they whip, you should always wear safety glasses in the vineyard to protect your eyes. I'm going to take this adjacent one off here. So you can see right away that it opens up the area, and you can better assess where you need to make your final cuts. These vines are trained as bilateral cordons, and what that means is that from the trunk I take two vines out in each direction, and those are called cordons. Then I do spur pruning, which on that cordon, I choose a spur evenly spaced along the cordon and prune it down to 2 buds. It makes for a nice clean vine. And then I have 2 pairs of wires. There's 2 here and 2 up here. And I train the vines, which is called VSP, vertical shoot positioning, which means that the vines are trained vertically through the wires. The only difference is that I'm standing on the north side and the south side needs a little more shade, so I let some of the vines drape over and shade the fruit. It also makes it easier to pick the fruit, because standing on this side, the fruit are all in the fruiting zone, and I don't have to deal with the canes in my face. And my helpers like that too. Okay, so we've cleaned off what you call rough pruning or pre-pruning, and now I go along the cordon and I remove last year's spurs that I don't want to keep, and that opens up the cordon even further. So here's last year's spur, and I just take it off right there. Here's another one here that I remove. Sometimes there's vines, canes on the bottom. Here's one here that's long and lanky, and I take that off. So as you see, as I go along, this was last year's spur that I trimmed last year, and now I'm taking it off. You'll also see right here, last year's spur, I pruned to 2 buds, and I got a cane and a cane. And then from the basal, from the base of the spur, I got another strong cane here and another strong cane here. What I choose to do is keep those basal buds, canes, for this year's spurs. And as you notice, they are growing really close to the cordon. So I'll continue this all the way across both cordons. I do a vine at a time. And this vine is, as they get mature, the cuts get harder because the canes are bigger, and it's very important to have sharp tools, both with your hand pruners and the loppers, which we'll use in a few minutes. It's good for the vine to have clean cuts, and it makes it easier on the hands. Okay, I've gone through and taken off most of the last year's spurs that I don't want to keep. And now you notice, if you look at what I have left, they're pretty evenly spaced along the length of the cordon on both sides. They're not exactly, but the idea is that if you make them evenly spaced, the plant is more balanced in its growth, and you'll have more consistent ripening of fruit. The canopy will be more consistent, and it just makes it easier. So now we start at this end, and we're going to choose one of these last year's canes as our new spur. So here's a nice vertical one that's right near the end, and so I prune it at 2 buds. One bud is right here at the base, and one is about halfway up. Now I'll get 2 strong canes from those buds, plus I may get some new canes that come up from the basal or the base of the spur. So usually once you get going, you can just move down the vine. So here's the next one. The next one. The next one. And the next one.